What's up guys, Nick Drew here, and today we're going to cover two very specific situations with credit cards and YNAB. First, we're going to talk about credit card cash back and how to deal with rewards, and then next I'm going to show you what to do with refunds when you buy something and then later return it. We're going to clear up any confusion that you have, even though it can be very confusing, like if you buy something one month and then take it back the next. But we're going to cover both these things in depth so that you know exactly what to do. With that being said, let's jump in. Alright, so there's a few ways to handle cashback depending on the type of cashback you receive. We're going to do the easy way first. If you take your cashback as literal cashback, like not a statement credit, and your credit card company deposits money into your checking account, you just simply go to your checking account and add a new transaction. The key here is you're not going to do any kind of transfer from your credit card company to checking. You're just simply going to create a new payee. In this case, I typically do something like the credit card name dash cashback. So this one will be Chase Freedom dash cashback. Now the category is inflow to be budgeted. This messes a lot of people up. There's not any, you're not going to categorize it based on a category or spending. You're going to categorize it to be budgeted because it's an inflow into your checking account. And then the memo will just put cash back, and then the inflow will be $100. So now if we go over to inflow to be budgeted, here it is right here, and you can use that money to do anything you want. Maybe in this case, I'll use it to boost our savings towards those kayaks that we've been wanting. All right, now let's look at the second type of cashback you might get, which is a statement credit, or in some cases, a reimbursement for specific expenses. Some companies do rewards based on certain types of spending, like travel, but either way, these are all just versions of the credit card company applying cash to the actual card itself. So in this case, you're not going to choose the checking account like we did here. This time, you're going to choose the actual credit card where the cashback is going to come through at. We're going to do the same thing here. So add a transaction. The category here is again going to be budgeted, and the inflow, do $75 this time. Now, in order to really show you what this will actually do, we need to add another transaction here so you kind of get what's going on. So let's say that we had a transaction for Walmart and we just went and bought a bunch of groceries. And let's say that we spent $500 on groceries. So now what happened? Well, we had spending of $500 on groceries, so the balance on the card should have been $500. But now in this case, the cashback got applied directly to the card. So we see that our balance is actually $425, not $500. So let's see what happened on the budgeting side. Well, when you go over here, you notice that our to be budgeted stayed zero. But that seems funny because we just put this in as to be budgeted. Normally that makes this go up, but in this case it didn't. Now remember what I just said. We had $425 balance now because we did have $500 balance, and then we subtracted $75 because it got applied directly to the card. Now notice here, the Discover payment category is at $500, yet we only owe $425. This is where that extra $75 went. Now, if you're not entirely sure how credit cards in general work, you may want to watch my other video that explains credit cards in detail. I'll link it in the description down below. But just remember that when we budget for groceries, we budgeted $500, and we had $500 available in our account. If you go back here, you can see we had $500. So we had $500 available. We spent $500, and so it moved the $500 from this category up here. And then when we applied $75 as a statement credit, it basically subtracted what we owed on the card. But since we had already budgeted for the $500 that we have up here, we're now in a position where we have the ability to pay more money than we actually owe. And that's where the $75 is. So what you do now is click this, say, I want to move $75 to be budgeted, or any other category, and then now everything is even. You've got $425 available to pay your card off, which is what you've got here, and you've got $75 up here that you can use for anything else that you would like to do. Now I should say this is really for people who are paying their card off in full every single month. If you still have a lot of credit card debt that you're trying to get rid of, then if that's your case, you don't have to do that whole moving it around thing. So let's say that you had a really large starting balance of, maybe $3,000 that you're trying to pay down over time. So now you actually still owe $3,425. And so even though you have $500 able to pay against it, that's fine. The $75 cash back is just going to reduce your overall amount that you owe, and you're fine here. The moving money around here that I did is really only for people who are paying their card in full every single month and want to use that cash back to do something else. But that's cash back. That's how you handle it. Let's move on to talking about refunds. Now, I wanted to cover both of these topics in one video because they're very similar in nature in the way that you handle them. Now, when it comes to refunds in YNAB, there's a couple different situations that you could find yourself in. We're going to do the simple one first, and we'll do the more complex one in a second. The first type of refund is easy. So let's say I do this on the Chase. We're going to add a transaction and pretend that I purchase a Frisbee today. So we'll go to Amazon. It'll be Nick spending, buy myself a new Frisbee, $12 because it's such a cheap sport and awesome. So great. So now I spent $12 and then I decide, you know what, maybe I don't want that new Frisbee. The one I've got is actually fine. So I really don't want to buy this. Now I issue a refund to Amazon and then I have a couple of ways to handle this in YNAB. So the easiest way is literally just go here and then hit delete. And that completely gets rid of the transaction. And this isn't the most accurate way to do it, but it will work. The reason this isn't the most accurate is because if Amazon has already charged your card, then if you delete this transaction, then YNAB is not going to reflect the actual account for a few days, because it's going to take 2 or 3 or maybe even a week for Amazon to process the transaction and put the $12 back on your card. So this working balance right here is going to be incorrect kind of in that in-between time. But if that's not a big deal to you, then you can absolutely just delete the transaction if you're going to do a refund really close to when you actually paid for it. Now let's pretend that you don't want to delete the transaction. You want to accurately reflect what's going on. So maybe this already hit your credit card account. We'll clear the transaction in this case. And then what you want to do is you'll actually add a new transaction. We're going to make the payee the exact same. Now here's the key. Unlike Cashback, we're not going to choose inflow to be budgeted here. We're actually going to choose the exact same category that we did the spending in. This is where people get messed up. And then we're going to do a $12 inflow. And then great. So now the balance of the credit card is 0 and these two transactions have offset each other. Now let me quickly explain why we do the categories the same and not inflow to be budgeted here. Let's delete this for a second so you can see. So we spent $12. If I go over to reports and I look here, then we can see that the trend is that I've spent $500 and I spent $12, okay, on just for fun in this category this month. If we look at it here, you can see that. And if I add a transaction, that's Amazon, and I do inflow to be budgeted here, there's some things you can actually do over on the budgeting side to make this work, but the problem is your report is still going to say that you spent $12 on a Frisbee, and that's not true anymore because you returned this. So the only way to keep your report accurate is if you make these two categories match each other. So when you do that, now they offset each other, and when I get to the report, it's like I never spent that money in the first place. So this is why it's so important that when you do returns, they need to be in the same category. Now this is going to be the most common type of refund, where you buy something and then very soon hereafter, probably not the same day, but a couple of days later, you're returning the item. That's the most common thing that people run into. But there is a scenario that's a little more complicated, where you buy something in October, let's say, and then you don't get the refund until November. Maybe it took you a while to realize you wanted to return it, or maybe it just took a little while to actually process the return. So let's see what happens when you buy something in 1 month and have to wait till the next to get the refund. So let's say I want to buy a pair of shoes in October. So we'll do October 20th, we'll do Vans. Now the category will be clothing, and it'll be shoes, and let's say they're $100. Yeah, they're expensive shoes, okay? All right, so now maybe a week or two goes by, and on November 1st, I decide, you know what, that was really a waste of money. I probably shouldn't buy those, so I'm going to return them. Now the category again needs to match, so clothing and clothing, and the inflow here, match it and do $100. Now let's examine what just happened. Everything looks good here. We've got a 0 working balance because of the return. Got a 0 balance here, and we have a 0 balance here. So everything looks good on this screen. Let's see what happened to the budget. So if we look at October, things kind of make sense, right? We budgeted $100 for the shoes in the first place, and then we bought them October 20th. And we know how credit cards work, so it moved that $100 up here to the Amex to pay it off. It's kind of weird because we have a 0 now. Okay, let's look at November and see what's going on here. So November, now we've got this weird $100 positive flow on the activity, and we have $100 here, and we have nothing up here. So what happened here? Well, what YNAB did is it basically realized what you were doing. You had spending on here, but then in November, you actually had a positive inflow to that credit card account. And so it offset everything here, and here's where your $100 went. So now your options are, you could just leave the $100 in the clothing if you knew you were going to use it in this category in the future, or you could just move that $100 to be budgeted. It'll put a negative here. And now in November, today, the day that you're doing this, the day you're doing the return and entering this transaction, you're back to what life is actually like, where you've got this $100 that you did not spend now, that you can decide what you want to do with it. Now, let me explain to you why this trips people up and what you might be doing if you're having a problem. What a lot of people do is they don't do what I just did. They actually go back to October and they say, well, you know what? I didn't ever spend that money because I returned it. So now I don't have to budget for that money in October. So then they put a 0 here. And everything looks kind of okay here because they're like, well, yeah, it makes sense because I had overspending. So it makes sense that this is yellow, but it should get cleaned up in November because, I returned it. Then they go to November and they freak out because now all of a sudden they have this weird negative $100 in their credit card category. And it seems weird, but it's kind of accurate because of the way that you told YNAB what was happening here, because you had this inflow to a credit card and then you also had overspending on top of it. So YNAB doesn't really know what to do. So if you were going to do it this way, technically what you should do at this point is move $100 from this category of clothing up to here to the Amex. And if you notice, before I do this, notice we now also have this brand new $100 up here as well. That's because we didn't budget it here, so it went up here, okay? So we move this up to the Amex, and now we're essentially in the place that we were just a second ago, where this is zero, and we have $100 that we can use on whatever category we want. The weird thing is you still have this overspending in October, so that looks funny, but everything is now set correctly on this screen. Now again, in this situation, I really do recommend not doing it this way. I'm a huge fan of doing it realistically, right? You budgeted $100, you spent $100, then later you decided to do a refund, so you have an excess $100 in clothing. So now let's put that into be budgeted. Now the only annoying thing I will say is that sometimes when you do this approach, it will make your reports look a little annoying over time. So here's an example. Let's say that you spent $300 on groceries in October. And then let's say that in November, we returned $100 of those groceries, right? So $100 inflow for the return. And then now, so that you can see what's going on, let's say that we also paid our internet bill today. So we'll do $120 there. So that'll be an outflow. Spent $300 on groceries in October. So far, November 1st, we have paid our $120 internet bill, and we've returned $100 of the groceries we bought in October. So over in our budget, everything looks good the way it's supposed to. What's messed up though is that when you go to the reporting section, the reports make you look like you still spent $300 on groceries in October. And again, because you technically did. But then when you come over here, our internet, it shows 120 spent. But when you look at our overall spending back on the main screen, it actually subtracts out that $100 to give you your overall spending. So when you dig into the details, you did spend $300 here, you did spend $120 on internet, but when you look at the overall categories, it does take into effect that you returned $100 and it takes down that 120 down to 20. If this really just bothers you and you're a real geek out over it, you can always just backdate it. So I'd be lying if I said that I hadn't done this before, especially when it's, close, like the 1st and the 31st. It's not going to be 100% accurate, but this is your budget and it's up to you. All right, so there you have it. That's how you handle credit card rewards and returns in YNAB. Now I want to give a big shout out to the YNAB community on Reddit. I was able to source a lot of good information and examples for this video from that community. Please let me know down in the comments below if you like this video and found it helpful for you. As always, subscribe to the channel for more videos just like this. And remember, I can teach you how to map out your money, but I can't make you do it. The choice is yours. I'll see y'all next time.